Greetings and welcome back to Room 303. We are engaged in a series of talks, conversations with Gibran the Prophet. We turn now to passage 22, lecture number 22, on time. And this is going to be one of those very interesting moments in the Prophet where Gibran is such a forecaster of so much of what's going to happen in the 20th and 21st century. I mean, think about Heidegger's Time and Being. I mean, there's just so much that we'll go into. Stephen Hawking's classic work with this question of time. How much of what will happen in the future in science, in astronomy, in physics, the study of time. And yet here, in just a few lines, Gibran is really going to challenge us. This is, of course, time, one of the great questions of all time in science and in philosophy and elsewhere, no question. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, you'll find our playlist. My hope is that you've already dealt with the introductory set of comments and all the preceding conversations. We just finished with on talking, and now we'll move to time. Now, of course, the ironies will abound in this passage, no question. We're going to try with time to regulate what is not so easily regulated, because of course time is ultimately timeless. It is interesting to 3B already. I'm sorry, to 3A already. You'll remember in Daniel Bornstein's classic, the great historian at the Library of Congress, when he wrote that classic, The Discoverers, a volume that I recommend to all of you to enjoy reading, that as he tells the history of humanity, the first chapter is actually on what? Time. And humans desire to somehow try and capture that time. And the way in which the history of capturing or measuring time is in and of itself a fascinating paradox, right? Now, of course, no question that we're going to see the power of the seasons and the cycles will make us think about Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching and, of course, the yin-yang and the idea that everything is cyclical in some way. We're going to be challenged in this passage to consider the similarities between time and love. That is to say, both of them will be paradoxes that produce a sense of awe or wonder, right? And, of course, all time is somehow related to our understanding or comprehension of the past, the present, and the future. And now we're to Robert Burns's To a Mouse, and maybe we'll have some comments about that here at the end. And of course, time and space is a mystery. It is, some have argued, the mystery of all mysteries of human experience. To comprehend eternity as freedom might be the argument that Gibran will be playing with. Notice we're going to start with an astronomer who, of course, we think about Walt Whitman's learned astronomer, don't we? Understands on some level the machinations in the study of time, and yet he's interested, as he will say, Master, what of time? To which Al-Mustafa will then respond, you would measure time, the measureless, and the immeasurable. So, right away, there's your paradox. In other words, you can't talk about time just like you can't talk about love because you can never get around to actually defining what it is. How are you going to talk about it if you can't define it, right? So he says, we go out to try and measure what is measureless, what is beyond measure, immeasurable, right? And in that process, we're already engaged, what? In that inability as humans to do the very thing we think we need to do so well. Notice the you here. It's interesting. Is it directly at the astronomer, or is he just talking to all of us? You would adjust your conduct and even direct the course of your spirit according to hours and seasons. Of time, you would make a stream upon whose bank you would sit and watch its flowing. We obviously think of Thoreau's Walden too. Time is the stream I go a-fishing in. We've given full lectures on Walden at learnstrong.net for those of you that want to enjoy that. We keep coming back to Thoreau because of the romanticism that obviously is so much a part of Gibran's view here. In other words, we like to think that we understand these concepts like time. And we would like to think that somehow we could sit and watch the stream of time. We immediately, of course, think about Heraclitus, who says you can't step into the same river twice and all of that. We would like to think that we could play that game, but of course, we can't. Why? Because we are a part of the very thing that we are speculating upon, right? He goes to the word yet next. Yet, the timeless in you is aware of life's timelessness, right? Think about the power of this insight, and knows that yesterday is but today's memory, and tomorrow is today's dream. Of course, brilliantly poetic way of saying it, we live or have tendencies to live in normally one of two places, the past or the future. Of course, neither of them actually exist, do they? They are only something that's a figment of our imagination. And because that's the case, we're always dancing along this continuum. And that which sings and contemplates in you is still dwelling within the bounds of that first moment which scattered the stars into space. I love that he uses the word still, just like I love it that I think he probably learned it from his study of Whitman, and of course I love that T.S. Eliot will play the same game. We must be still and still moving into another blah, 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 blah. That idea of using the word still, it can have that sense of permanence, but also duration. Isn't that fascinating? And he says it that way. Whatever it is that's in us, that sings, did you notice the musical reference, and contemplates in you is still dwelling within the bounds of that first moment which scattered the stars into space. The Big Bang Theory could be the mention here, or the act of creation, however you wish to read it. And then he goes to these rhetorical questions, which are again wonderful, complicated but wonderful. Who among you does not feel that his power to love is boundless? And yet, who does not feel that very love, though boundless, encompassed within the center of his being, and moving not from love thought to love thought, nor from love deeds to other love deeds? And is not time, even as love is, undivided and spaceless? Well, the power of his rhetorical questions sometimes leaves us in silence still, right? As we think about what it is that he's pointing out. Both time and love are words that we really can't completely comprehend or understand, but we use them all the, hey, what time is it? You know, that kind of thing. Or, I love you. We do this kind of thing, back to the earlier passage on talking. We use these words without really fully appreciating the challenge that we really don't have a clue what we're talking about, and yet somehow we do. When you are with the person that you love the most, isn't it amazing how time, as they say, stands still, right? So for example, you're with them and all of a sudden you look and you're like, oh, 5 hours just went by. How is that possible? Well, the nature of time and the nature of love, something that we understand intuitively, but we don't understand at all. It's quite a mystery. But final observation. If in your thought you must measure time into seasons, let each season encircle all the other seasons. And let today embrace the past with remembrance and the future with longing. I mean, we immediately have to think about Proust, don't we, in a passage like this? Go back to the opening of that famous passage, right? Notice the observation. Okay, look, we have to live in the real world. This is what I love about Gibran. He can be philosophic, he can be esoteric, but he also is always going to bring us back to the normal life, to the real life. Okay, look, we got to measure, right? We got to measure. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. One is, of course, is Prufrock. I've measured out my life with coffee spoons. In other words, our lives are poorly spent. Do I dare disturb the universe, he will ask, in the 45th, 46th line of Prufrock. But there's another way to see it. Look at the events in your life as always being connected. Everything is of great importance. You'll remember that Ulysses will say it through Tennyson's poem, Ulysses. I am part of all that I have met, yet all experiences and art were through gleams that untraveled world, whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. Everything is connected, guys. It's all a part of who we are and what we are. It's all a part of time. So think about the seasons as always being a part of our lives. All events are connected. There is nothing useless. There is nothing thrown away. All events in our lives matter because they're all part of this stream, this continuum of time. Well, at 2a, I think his argument here is that time, like love, is boundless and yet somehow contained within that eternal self. We comprehend it on some profound level. At 2b, I love the word picture of the stream of time. I love the power of the rhetorical questions that are here. At 3a, we mentioned Heidegger. Burns is to a mouse, of course. He jacks the mouse's house and says, I'm really sorry. And then all of a sudden he goes, you know, you and me were kind of alike, though. We both build houses, and then they get jacked by the plow. We make our plans, the best laid plans of mice and men soon off to go awry. But then finally he says, I wish I could be more like you, mouse, because the moment I jacked your house, the first thing you did was go to build another house. Why? Because you don't have that sense of the past or that fear of the future because of your past. You just go off because you live in the present. And wouldn't it be so great if we could learn how to more live in the present now, as opposed to always being ashamed of the past or being afraid of the future? But the passage that I really want us to finish with, one of my favorites, is Burnt Norton. Those opening lines of T.S. Eliot's classic. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. What might have been is an abstraction, remaining a perpetual possibility only in a world of speculation. What might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. Footfalls echo in the memory, down the passage which we did not take, towards the door we never opened, into the rose garden. My words echo thus in your mind. We've given full lectures on all of the 4 quartets at learnstrong.net. I recommend that you go back and run some of those lectures to ground as well, and then marry some of that to your study of Gibran. I think it works rather well. Finally, at 3b, how are we going to own a set of lines like this? How are we going to make them our own? Well, what are your thoughts about time and love and the ways in which we dance in and out of time? And to what degree is your study of Gibran helping you to have a better grasp of the eternal notion of time and, of course, of love? Now, interestingly, from this conversation, it's as if from time, then Gibran goes, you know what, let's go ahead and just pick it up. The question of theodicy and the question of good and evil. Oh, that ought to be fun. Thank you.